I'm Elena Moretti, 42 years old, and for 12 years, I've carried the bitter taste of a family betrayal that soured my winemaking dreams and forced me to ferment a new vintage. It was the autumn of 2013, a crisp April morning in the Barossa Valley, the air rich with the scent of ripening grapes from the Moretti vineyards and the distant hum of tractors along Tanunda Road, when I faced my older brother, Marco Moretti, in the rustic tasting room of our family estate, a generational winery in South Australia's wine country. The room, with its oak barrels, scattered tasting notes, and the faint clink of glasses, had been my creative sanctuary during the relentless 14-hour harvest seasons that defined my early life, a place where the crush of grapes and the blend of flavors had fueled my passion. But that day had turned into a cellar where my ambitions were corked under the harsh glare of a chandelier. I was 30 then, a gifted winemaker with a flair for bold blends, my proposed vintage, featuring a Shiraz Cabernet fusion, a partnership with local growers, and a detailed recipe I'd crafted, winning a South Australian Wine Award and catching the eye of industry critics, my palate earning whispers of leadership among the vineyard hands who saw me as the estate's future. I'd grown up at Moretti Vineyards, trained under our father, Antonio, after studying oenology at the University of Adelaide, bringing a fresh approach to a winery steeped in tradition, outdated techniques, conservative labels, a turnover rate nearing 17%, my name a quiet hope among workers who believed I could uncork new success. But that morning, as I presented a detailed plan for a premium wine line, highlighting organic methods, a collaboration with the Barossa wine region, and a pilot batch I'd fermented, to secure a $180,000 state agriculture grant and elevate the family name, Marco's demeanor shifted from sibling to rival, his posture stiffening as he swirled a glass of wine. "You'll never run this vineyard, Elena. Stick to pruning vines," he snapped, his voice cutting through the hum of the air conditioner, his eyes narrowing with a mix of entitlement and resentment as he tapped my recipe with a spoon. He confessed, with a smug sip that made my stomach turn, that he'd stolen my blend, submitting it under his name to the grant committee just days before my presentation, securing the funding and a glowing review in the Advertiser that credited his winemaking prowess. To bury me, he orchestrated my sidelining with fabricated accusations, spoiled batches based on tampered records, poor judgment from a staged dispute over a harvest, backed by a loyal foreman he'd bribed, and a conveniently timed cellar flood that lost my fermentation logs, which I'd stored in a waterproof case that appeared soaked after a maintenance check. Our father, swayed by Marco's 8-year tenure as heir apparent, his ties to a wine distributor who'd funded the tasting room's renovation, and my lack of allies, my logs gone, leaving me voiceless, upheld his decision in 2014, relegating me to vineyard labor, my reputation tarnished across the Barossa as unreliable and overambitious, a stain that clung to me like sediment in a glass. My partner, Sam, a kind-hearted cooper with a love for folk songs and a steady hand, supported me, but our savings dwindled under barrel costs. Our dream of a hillside home with a cellar fading into the cramped reality of a cottage with sagging beams, a creaky chair, and a smoky fireplace that crackled through the nights. Those words, "Never run this vineyard, stick to pruning vines," became a relentless echo, a haunting refrain that reverberated through every vine I trimmed, every cluster I harvested, every moment I stood alone in the rows, the sound mingling with the rustle of leaves and the hum of bees. I can still feel the weight of those early months after the demotion, sitting in that creaky chair in our cottage, the vineyard hills visible through the window a reminder of my lost legacy, as I flipped through wine magazines and job listings in the Australian, the ink smudging my fingers with each turn of the page, my eyes burning with exhaustion after sleepless nights replaying Marco's betrayal. The cottage, with its hand-me-down furniture, a wobbly table Sam had salvaged from a shed, a chair with a split seat he'd patched with leather, and a single window overlooking a dirt track where workers trudged, felt a world away from the tasting room I'd envisioned, its air heavy with the lingering scent of grapes and oak I'd brought home on my apron, a reminder of the life I'd lost. Sam took on extra barrel repairs, hoops for wineries in Clare, stays in McLaren Vale, his evenings spent sanding under a lantern, the scent of wood and eucalyptus a testament to his sacrifice, while I pieced together a fragile existence with part-time pruning in Ongaston, bottling gigs in Nuriutpa, and weekend shifts at a wine shop in Tanunda, each sip a fight to reclaim my craft. Every dollar a step toward survival in a region where vineyard prices soared and winemaking dreams fell out of reach. Our daughter, Sophia, born in 2015 after years of hoping, grew up surrounded by corks turned into toys, recipes stacked beside her crib, her childish questions a tender ache. "Why don't you make wine anymore, Mummy?" she'd ask, her small hands tracing the edges of my award plaque. I'd smile through the tightness in my throat, spinning tales of new flavors to share with the world. But the truth gnawed at me. Marco had blacklisted me, his narrative of my instability spreading to estates and cooperatives, his influence a barrier to my leadership, leaving me stuck in the vines of a career I'd once led. Marco's reign flourished in the years that followed. By 2018, he branded Moretti Vineyards as a premium label, his name etched on awards from the Royal Adelaide Wine Show, his wealth evident in a hilltop villa in Lyndoch, a holiday cabin in the Adelaide Hills, and a leased Range Rover for his tours. He hosted lavish wine tastings at the National Wine Centre, his wife Lucia dazzling in vineyard attire at charity events for viticulture, his son Luca rising as a cellar hand with a diploma from TFSA, while I rebuilt quietly, starting a small wine blog by 2016 from our cottage. My posts grew. Reviews for wineries in the Eden Valley, tips in the Fleurieu Peninsula, who savored my insights, my reputation a quiet undercurrent in the Barossa scene, passed along at farmers' markets and local tastings. But the wound deepened with every milestone of Marco's success. His smug speeches at the Barossa Grape and Wine Association, Lucia's Instagram posts from Kangaroo Island, Luca's assistant role on a Shiraz project, each a fresh vintage of pain. Our father, who passed in 2020, had believed Marco's lies, his final years dimmed by his version of events, his will favoring Marco with the estate, leaving me a token plot. Sophia, now a 10-year-old budding vintner at Barossa Valley School, wrestled with loyalty, her early interests shadowed by Marco's influence, her questions about my work strained by her uncle's favor in the family. Sam's unwavering support, his hand-hewn barrels, his late-night folk songs over cups of port, his repairs of our smoky fireplace, kept me steady, his love a steady pour in the turmoil. The turning point came 3 years ago, in 2022, when the first cracks in Marco's polished facade emerged. His vineyard faced lawsuits over contaminated batches, workers posted viral complaints on X about unfair wages, and a whistleblower exposed falsified yield reports in the advertiser expose. At 39, with my back aching from years of pruning, I began my discreet investigation, contacting old hands over tea at cafes in Angaston. I'd meet them in the early mornings, my notebook a shield, listening to their tales of Marco's decline. Overworked crews, diluted wines, a culture of fear, over plates of lamingtons and chai. Last month, on July 20th, 2025, I sat with Rosa, a former hand who'd left in 2021, at a cafe in Tanunda, the hum of harvesters a faint backdrop. Her trembling hands passed me a USB drive. "He's souring. Stolen blends. Fake reports. Pressure on us to hide spoilage," she whispered, her voice thick with regret. "That vintage was yours, Elena." My pulse raced. This was the proof I'd waited for. On August 10th, 2025, I contacted Liam, a journalist with the advertiser who'd uncovered winery scandals with a keen nose, meeting him at his cluttered office in Adelaide. We pored over the USB, photos of my 2013 recipe sketch, detailed logs of Marco's theft, emails hinting at bribed inspectors. "This could uncork him," Liam said, his voice a mix of excitement and caution. "But we need the right bottle." On August 22nd, 2025, I dug deeper, turning our cottage into a detective's lair. Amid corks and recipe books, I accessed public records online, my fingers stiff but resolute. At 10 a.m., I found it, a 2023 audit report buried in the SA Agriculture Department archives, tied to my plan, now linked to a contamination scandal that cost the vineyard $210,000 in fines. My hands shook as I printed it, the past merging with the present in a surge of clarity. That morning, at 10:26 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on September 6, 2025, I sat by my window, the Barossa Hills a soft glow, plotting my next move. The South Australian Wine Awards were on September 20th, a glittering event to mask Marco's decline. I'd attend, not as the pruner, but as his reckoning. What he didn't know was I transformed my pain into a vintage of justice, aged by 12 years of resilience. The 4 weeks leading to the awards were a meticulous fermentation of strategy and secrecy, my days running the blog a cover for the revenge bottling in my mind. By August 25, 2025, our cottage, its walls lined with recipes faded by smoke, its table cluttered with blend drafts stained with wine, its air rich with the scent of grapes and wood, became my cellar where every penciled adjustment and cork test fueled my resolve. Liam and I met nightly, his recorder open on my creaky chair as we dissected the USB and audit reports, the soft crackle of the fireplace a rhythm to our planning. My 2013 Shiraz Cabernet blend, with its organic focus and regional tie-in, had won Marco his grant, its success a label of his rise, while my fermentation tweaks, wild yeast I'd proposed, had been misused, leading to the 2023 scandal. Rosa's data revealed a pattern: stolen recipes from 2014, falsified yields in 2020, a cover-up of a 2022 mold issue hushed with inspector bribes, a fragile vineyard on the brink. I contacted Dr. Patel, a retired viticulturist who'd clashed with Marco over a 2017 harvest dispute, his wise voice joining us via a crackling Zoom call from his home in the Clare Valley. This could strip his license, hit him mid-toast, he advised, his tone laced with old tensions. I nodded, my plan a vintage crafted from 12 years of suppressed rage, each sip a memory of lost harvests, stolen credit, shattered trust. The awards, set for 7 p.m. on September 20th, 2025, at the National Wine Center, would be Marco's stage, a gathering of winemakers, critics, media, and buyers, all drawn by the promise of prestige under the venue's modern arches. I'd pose as a retired winemaker, my apron swapped for a modest outfit with a hidden pocket, my movements slow with a cane to conceal my intent, my dark hair in a loose braid a symbol of my enduring craft. My task was to deliver the evidence to Liam, who'd signaled Dr. Patel's Agriculture Board contacts at 8 p.m., timed with Marco's acceptance speech, ensuring maximum exposure. I secured an invitation through Sophia, now a 10-year-old who charmed a judge's daughter at a school fair, her email on August 28th a laminated pass I clutched like a bottle, her note reading, "You're my winemaker, Mummy." She suspected nothing, her innocence a tool I'd wield with care. Preparation was a rigorous crush, a blend of physical discipline and emotional fortitude. I practiced my shuffle daily along the vineyard rows, perfecting a weary gait and a warm, unassuming smile that masked my burning resolve, my cane tapping a rhythm of patience against the earth. I rehearsed lines, just here to celebrate wine heritage, though each word carried the weight of Marco's betrayal, Sam's steadfast love, and Sophia's silent pride in my past. Physically, I pressed grapes and tested blends daily, my hands protesting, but each pour strengthened my will to stand tall that night. I revisited old mementos, recipe sketches from 2013, a faded photo with Sam at a harvest, a cork Sophia decorated, a rejected grant proposal, each a spark in my fire. One night, I found a soaked log from the cellar flood, its pages blurred, and wept, the lost vintage fueling my fury. I tracked Sophia's life, her vineyard playdates, her friendship with a girl named Chloe, hoping this act would secure her future free from Marco's shadow. On September 17th, Marco called, his tone smooth with false warmth. "Elena, the awards are ours. Bring Sophia, let's toast peace," he said, his voice rich but laced with condescension. I agreed, hiding my scheme. He didn't suspect I'd coordinated with Liam, who'd lined up Dr. Patel's contacts, or that I'd commissioned an outfit with a hidden pocket, its fabric a shield of my past honor. The outfit arrived on September 19th, sewn by a local seamstress from Nuriutpa, Mrs. Rossi, who chatted about her jams, unaware of my mission. I tested the pocket, sliding the USB and awed inside, their weight a promise of justice. At 6:30 p.m. on September 20th, I arrived, the wine center buzzing with the clink of glasses and the murmur of excited winemakers, the valley glinting through the arches. Marco spotted me near the entrance, smirking. "Elena, still pruning?" "Charming," he quipped. I nodded, my cane steady, my pocket ready. At 7:45 p.m., he began his speech, launching into a tale of his winemaking legacy and unveiling a new blend echoing mine. I scanned the scene, Sophia clapping awkwardly, Chloe beside her, media filming, Lucia sipping wine with a smug grin, Luca adjusting his father's notes. At 7:58 p.m., as Marco praised his vision, I edged toward Liam, my pulse a drumbeat. I slipped him the USB and awed it, whispering, "Now." He nodded, texting Dr. Patel. At 8:02 p.m., board members stormed in, badges glinting under the arch lights, shouting, "Investigation underway." Marco's recipe fell, his face paling as they seized his tablet. The awards ceremony erupted into a maelstrom of chaos, attendees scattering like startled galas fleeing the wine center's grand hall, media cameras swiveling to capture every frame of the unfolding family drama, Marco's protests drowned by the authoritative commands of board members that reverberated off the modern arches, the lights casting fractured beams across the scene. Sophia stood stunned near a tasting table, Chloe's hand on her arm offering silent support, her eyes wide with disbelief as the truth surfaced, while winemakers murmured in clusters, their tight-knit world rocked by the scandal. I stood tall, my outfit a badge of my hard-earned resolve forged over 12 years, my cane a symbol of strength that had carried me through the quietest rows, my heart pounding with a mix of 12 years of vindication and the bittersweet ache of a family nearly lost to Marco's deceit that had cast a long shadow. Board members swarmed the stage, their dark suits a stark contrast to the venue's elegant decor of glass panels and wooden floors, cuffing Marco as he roared, "This is a vendetta! Elena, you'll pay!" His voice cracking with the desperation of a man watching his legacy sour. They read charges, plagiarism that stripped his awards, falsified reports that undermined his reputation, safety breaches that tainted wines. Each word a hammer blow to his standing, the list growing with a $250,000 fine for unaccounted grants that funded his villa, their voices steady as they recited the litany. Liam approached, his voice a lifeline amid the din of shouting and camera shutters. "They've got him, Elena. You've done it. His vintage is spoiled," he said, his eyes alight with the thrill of the scoop. The media frenzy was instantaneous. Headlines like Moretti's wine scandal and Winemaker's 12-year revenge blazed across screens by 10 p.m., my name a murmur of awe in the chaos that swirled through the center, microphones thrust toward me like corkscrews seeking a twist. Marco turned to me, his face flushed with rage that mottled his once confident features, sweat beading on his brow like dew on a vine, his vineyard attire now rumpled as board members tightened their grip on his arms, his posture slumping under the weight of defeat. "You! After all this time, you petty little pruner! You've ruined our name!" he bellowed, his voice breaking with the desperation of a man whose cellar was empty, his hands shaking as he pointed at me with a trembling finger. I met his gaze, unflinching despite the tremor in my own hands that betrayed the adrenaline coursing through me, my voice clear and resonant with the strength of 12 years of silent suffering that had matured my resolve. "You said I'd never run this vineyard, Marco, that I was only fit for pruning vines. I proved you wrong, with evidence that outlasts your lies, with grit that outlasted your schemes, with every blend I crafted while you stole and faltered. This is my payback for me, for Sophia whose future you shadowed, for every worker you crushed, for every vintage you stole with your ego." He lunged, his fist raised in a futile gesture of defiance that spoke of his last grasp at control, but board members restrained him with firm hands, dragging him out as Lucia sobbed hysterically, her wine glass slipping to shatter on the floor in a spray of red, a symbol of her fallen status. Sophia rushed to me, her voice breaking through the noise like a lifeline tossed into a stormy harvest. "Mummy, I didn't know. I'm sorry for loving Uncle Marco," she said, tears streaking her face as she wrapped her arms around me, the first embrace in months that mended a rift I'd feared growing. I hugged her back, the warmth of her body against mine a balm to the wounds of the past, Chloe nodding in support with a quiet smile, a bridge to a future reclaimed from the vines of my past. The crowd buzzed with reporters, their microphones thrust toward me like presses seeking juice, but I turned away, my victory a private vintage burning bright within, a blend no scandal could dilute. The fallout was swift and unyielding, a vintage that soured the remnants of Marco's winery empire. Board members suspended him from Moretti Vineyards, seizing fields in Tanunda and cellars in Lindauch where barrels sat silent, records from yield logs hauled away in crates, freezing his personal accounts that held the profits of his deceit, halting his tastings across South Australia where he'd once presided, while inspectors raided his villa for evidence of fraud, uncovering a cache with falsified certificates. His vineyard crumbled like a failed ferment, his reputation tarnished beyond repair, estates distancing themselves with press releases, his name a cautionary tale whispered in cellars from Clare to Coonawarra, a fallen winemaker replaced by silence. The media dug deeper, uncovering a $120,000 slush fund for bribed inspectors that funded his Adelaide Hills cabin and Lucia's wardrobe, a detail that sent shockwaves through the Australian wine sector and prompted a state review, the scandal-dominating evening news. Sophia reconciled fully, joining me in learning winemaking for our cottage, while Sam and I planned a hillside getaway to a home we finally saved for, the scent of grapes a promise of peace. Lucia faded from gala circuits, her social circle dissolving like a receding tide, and Luca, Marco's son, distanced himself, seeking a cellar role under a new mentor to escape the taint. I didn't gloat. My goal was justice, not destruction, a balance I'd learned from years of perfecting blends. But the sight of Marco's fall brought a profound peace that filled the hollow left by his words, a quiet satisfaction that settled in my soul like a well-aged wine. That morning, at 10:26 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on September 6, 2025, I sat with a cup of port that glowed ruby in the sunlight, the news confirming his suspension on a muted radio, a letter from Marco in hand, its envelope creased from my grip. Elena, I was wrong. Help me, it pleaded, his handwriting shaky with the defeat that had finally overtaken him, the ink smudged as if by tears of regret. I didn't reply, the past too raw, my strength too hard-won to soften now, the paper crumpling in my fist as I set it aside to focus on the vineyard ahead. Months later, his hearing began in a courtroom in Adelaide District Court, board members and inspectors wielding my evidence with the precision of a wine press, Rosa's testimony a damning narrative of viticultural corruption, and Dr. Patel's audit records a final label, the gallery filled with former hands who nodded in silent support, their aprons traded for suits. I attended the first day, my presence a silent testament to my journey from pruner to this moment, seated beside Sophia and Sam whose hand I held tightly, and watched Marco's defense crumble under the weight of truth. Dozens of former workers stepping forward with tales of pressure and theft, their voices a chorus of validation that echoed through the room. The judge, a stern jurist with a passion for wine, and a gavel that rang like a cork pop, ordered a full investigation, hinting at a potential license revocation and fines that loomed like a spoiled batch, his ruling a vindication of my 12-year wait. Sophia and I launched Moretti Revival Wines, restoring family pride with authentic blends, hiring Rosa as a supervisor whose expertise bridged my past and present, while Sam retired from coopering to teach woodworking to kids, his hands finding new purpose in staves. I visited the vineyard once, its rows silent with the absence of Marco's voice, its barrels a memory of my youth, a monument to his greed and my redemption that stood tall in my heart. My revenge, 12 years in the making, was not just justice served with a splash of spite. It was my rebirth, a vineyard reclaimed from the wreckage of his sabotage, a testament to the resilience I'd always carried within, a vintage that grew richer with each harvest I tended.